Today I'm here to talk to you about how you can know that your husband might be on the autism spectrum. You've had some questions, you've been wondering because things like going on vacation and you think, oh, he's going to spend time with me, we're going on vacation. And then he spends time doing the things that he likes by himself and you're left to fend for the children and do the cooking and all the things that you thought maybe you'd get a break from. When you're in public, your husband is charming, he's just an amazing person, and when you come home, it's like he's a different person. He wants to be by himself. Maybe he goes into his room and does his video games. Maybe he goes and does things that are without you and without the children. And you're wondering, what is this? Is it me? He doesn't want to be around me? And that's not it at all. Maybe in your marriage, you can't quite put a finger on what's wrong, but you know that there's something not quite right that you wanted in a really good marriage relationship, and you've worked hard and you've tried, and things still aren't what you had expected. Maybe you have a feeling of loneliness or a lack of connection. When you have a conversation with your husband, he either shuts it down or will go round and round in an argument with you, and you're left feeling, well, what just happened in that conversation? I had something important that I wanted to discuss with my husband. Maybe in the conversation he had a dismissive attitude or a defensive stance, and that was his way of dealing with a difficult conversation, with something that he might have to make a choice about or something that might have to change. Maybe you see your husband spending a lot of money on a special interest, and that concerns you. Does your husband have Aspergers? My name is Miriam Bolton. I'm a relationship coach, and I help wives who are in a neurodiverse relationship, married to someone on the autism spectrum, and I help them to find joy right where they are. So let's look at what is Asperger's. Asperger's is a high-functioning autism. It differs from classic autism because there are less severe symptoms and there were not language delays in their childhood. What is autism? Autism is a neurological disorder, and I like to call it a neurological difference, where the brain developed differently. It's not a disease, it's not a psychological disorder, it's just that the brain is wired differently and thinks differently than a neurotypical person. Autism is a spectrum disorder. What that means is you can have anything from what we used to think of as someone with autism who could not speak and could not function well, all the way up through people who are so high functioning you don't even know that they have it. And it is a spectrum, and no two people are the same. There's a great difficulty in developing social skills and knowing how to respond appropriately in situations. There's often a difficulty in communicating feelings and thoughts. And a lot of times there's a special interest where the person is obsessive about doing this activity to the exclusion of other people and relationships. Someone on the autism spectrum often needs routines and rituals, and they dislike very much when there's a change in the program. A person on the autism spectrum can be highly self-centered, which can come across as narcissism, but it's not your classic narcissist. They can also have a very high intelligence, very logical. They have jobs which are techie, where they can work by themselves and do routine things. So let's look at the social aspect of the Asperger's. There's a desire to fit in and to be like other people, but they have a hard time with making friends, and they just don't have the innate ability to do that. It's because they don't understand body language and facial expressions, and they may not make appropriate facial expressions themselves. For example, if someone dies, a loved one dies, their facial expression might not be one of sadness. They might have a smile on their face, but that might not be what they're feeling. Another tip that your husband might be on the autism spectrum, and please, this is no guarantee of whether or not he's diagnosable Aspergers, that is something that you need to take to a professional to do. My purpose is to put some light on the subject, to give you an idea if that's what is going on in your marriage relationship. Communication can often be difficult because the husband does not understand the wife's tone of voice. And if she brings something to him that is a concern to her, he might consider that she's complaining or that she's yelling at him without taking into consideration the tone of voice and what is truly being brought up in the conversation. Sometimes the person on the autism spectrum might give a long, logical monologue, and you find that you're talking with this person and they're on a special interest subject, and they'll talk and talk and talk, and if they take a breath, where you normally would have give and take in a conversation and it's your turn to speak, they'll just talk over you and talk louder because they want to get all of those thoughts out of their head and not waste time listening to what you're saying, not because they're unkind or mean, but it's not the way their brain works. So you'll get this long monologue and they don't realize that people are not as interested in this subject as they are. Oftentimes you'll find that the husband will speak on these logical subjects rather than on an emotional level. What that means is that the partner with Asperger's will put out facts and tell you all sorts of facts, maybe about the weather or politics or sports or whatever their interest is, without understanding that give and take in a conversation where you give and take ideas and thoughts and hopes and dreams, and it's more on the logical level without reaching a higher level of intimate conversation. Oftentimes in communication, they can be very literal. That means that if you say, would you mind closing the door? They might think, no, I wouldn't mind, but you never ask them to close the door, so they don't close the door. And that's where it's difficult for the wife who does not understand the way that his brain works and how logical she needs to be in her communication and literal, because the husband is often very literal in his communication. If you find that when you try to discuss your needs with your husband and he becomes defensive, that is his way of dealing with something that he just doesn't understand. He doesn't understand your feelings or why they're important to you. Another tip that your husband might be on the autism spectrum is a lack of spontaneity. Now, you might find this anyway, but to a much, much more extreme level in a marriage with Asperger's. And that is where it's so difficult for the husband to change things, change routines, change anything, because he doesn't understand the social skills and he keeps the same routine, the same things, might say the same greeting to you if he says a greeting to you or a goodbye in the morning, but he's unable to vary from those because of the lack of understanding social situations. So you just don't have that spontaneity, whether it's in the bedroom or it's in the everyday communication with your husband. The neurotypical wife understands social situations innately. It's just something she gets. She gets with another woman and the two of them find something in common and they hit it off and they're BFFs forever. Where the husband does not get that innately, and it's very fearful for him to navigate social situations, even with his wife, where perhaps in the past as a child he was made fun of or put down or bullied or just didn't go well when he had conversations with people. Another tip that your husband might be on the autism spectrum is his special interest. Does he have a special interest? And this, what I mean by this, is not a hobby that he does on the weekends, but something that to the exclusion of his family and relationships, he will spend time on. And it might be researching something, it might be spending money on something, maybe he just knows a lot about trains and the statistics that go with trains, or sports, the statistics that go with the sports. Something that takes his interest. It can even be work, and you might think, well, my husband's just a workaholic. Well, it might be his special interest, and he doesn't understand the need to spend time with his family, his children, his wife, with some good quality sit down and be together and spend some time talking, it's just easier for him to deal with his special interest and spend his time there. And the last one is self-centeredness. Does your husband seem very self-centered? And I mean this beyond the normal self-centered, where perhaps you are going somewhere and you have your children in the car and you get there and he sits there in the car while you unload all the children. So he sits in the car and then he can go park the car. And he doesn't think to get out and help you with the car seats and the stroller and all that. He just sits in the car. And you may think, he is so self-centered. It is called mind blindness, and that is where they don't see the needs of others. They do not innately see the needs. That might be where he's sitting where people have to walk by him and part of his body is out in the way, and he doesn't see the need to move his body because he doesn't anticipate the needs of another person. So it just seems like he comes across as very self-centered that way, and that is a mind blindness. It is part of the autism spectrum brain wiring. You may ask yourself, with these 5 things, why didn't I see these before I got married? I don't understand. My husband was kind. He went out of his way to be nice. It's called masking. And a person can mask or act only so long. It's like an actor acting in a play. They have all the words memorized and all the facial expressions and the emotions and the body language, and they put on an act. Can you imagine living an act? It's too hard. It is just too difficult. So once they get married, they're now with this person that they trust and they know loves them, and they can be themselves. And the difficult thing about when they're being themselves, you see that self-centeredness, the mind blindness, the exclusion of spending time with his wife or spending times that he's interested in. And these things were always there, but he was able to mask during that courting process, and you wouldn't have known. You wouldn't have seen it. I hope that has helped you today with the 5 tips for perhaps if your husband is on the Aspergers or the autism spectrum, maybe has Aspergers. But remember, to really know, you need to have a qualified person who will do the testing and be able to give you the results. If you need help, please reach out. My email is below, and I'd be glad to talk with you and help you to find joy in your marriage.